I'm Gimbal for ANI 245, and I'm just going to record this quick tutorial as a recap on setting up your camera for your project. So most of you have been working on your project 1, which is this fox through an obstacle course, and oops! So you notice that quick snap there? As I'm going through this, I can see that this camera that I'm working on has keys on it. So right now I'm in the perspective view, so I'm going to go over here to View, Select Camera. Whenever I want to select my camera, the one that I'm currently looking through, whether it be the perspective view, the top view, I can go to View, Select Camera to actually grab that camera. It looks like I've got some keys set. In fact, I do recall helping with these keys during class, so I'm glad Spencer left these on, and a quick shout out to Spencer for letting me use his scene. I'm glad he left these keys in here because it allows me to show you how to delete unwanted keys. So I'm going to go to View, Select Camera, I'm going to go Edit, and I'm going to go to the Keys menu. I'm going to go to Delete Keys, and I'm going to select the little box next to it just to make sure that my settings are set to Selected and not All. Otherwise I'd lose all the animation on everything in my scene. So just delete keys on Selected, and now I can see that I'm still in the perspective, or I still have the perspective camera selected, and there are no keys. Not that it's necessarily wrong to set keys on your perspective camera, it's just not ideal, since the perspective camera is typically our default for navigating our scene. So what I would prefer you do is to go to Create and make a new camera. And we talked about these camera types in class, I'm not going to rehash all of that, but I am going to create this new camera. It's called Camera 1. And to look through that camera, because I can press forward to wireframe and see the new camera created down there underneath all of this, this big obstacle here. So I'm just going to go to Panels, Perspective, and ask Maya to look through that camera. And then I'm going to zoom out so that I am back to framing my shot. Alright, so before we get started, it's a good idea to know actually where the camera is, as far as like what's in the camera's view, what's not. Because if I press Control A, now it looks like my camera has shrunk. Or if I do this, then it's even more so small. So I need something objective that is going to stay fixed as an aspect ratio for my camera and what will ultimately be my play blast. So I'm going to go under View, and I'm going to go under Camera Settings, and by default the camera is set to fill, which means it's going to fill the screen. Instead I want it to be set to vertical. Now to give you an idea of what that did, I'm going to go back to Fill, go to View, and since I keep going to this tab I'm just going to tear it off. And I'm going to ask that it shows me my safe action. So my safe action basically takes the aspect ratio that I have set up in my render settings, which evidently is a 16:9 setting, and it shows me basically an area in which everything I'm animating would be safe for a batch render. That way, if it's shown on different screens, nothing's going to be cropped. Safe title works for text, so there's different standard there. But if I press Control A, notice that the top of that viewport gets eclipsed by my timeline and by my shelves up here. So I want to go ahead and change my camera setting from fill to vertical, and that is going to allow basically the vertical side of this safe action to stay within my viewport no matter what I do. So if I bring in my attribute editor, well, I guess it does kind of cover if I do that, but most of the time I'm not going to do that, and this gives me a very clear idea of where my aspect ratio is going to be. Alright, so now that I have this set up, I want to start playing with camera angles and then setting those camera angles. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate stepped keys. I'm going to go in here to my little orange running guy with a gear. I'm going to go under Animation and change my out tangents to stepped. That way, every time I press my S key for setting a key, it's going to be stepped without any of those animation curves causing things to move about, unless I want them to. So the tool that I like to use when I'm setting things up for, like, say, a play blast is under the View tab. There's something called Bookmarks, and go to the Edit Bookmark menu. Alright, so by default this is the bookmark editor for camera 1, the camera that I've made. And I'm just going to randomly create a few camera scenes. So let's start with an establishing shot, like a shot that just shows the obstacle course before the fox starts running, or bouncing rather. So I'm going to go ahead when my camera is set just the way I want it and click New Bookmark. And then this appears, this thing that says Camera View 2. I can name this something like Establishing Shot and press, I actually don't need to press anything after that. Then let's say I want to go in and frame this shot where the fox is going to be swinging on these poles. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and click New Bookmark, maybe call it Close Up. Just Close Up 1, so whatever I end up choosing for my camera name, just basically something that'll help me remember what I did. So you got the fox, he's jumping on these poles, hits a wall, and he starts to scale upwards. Maybe I choose a different angle, something maybe looking up, kind of give you a sense of the character's climb. Alright, so I like this camera angle. Let's go ahead and go New Bookmark and say, I don't know, up angle, just something for your sake to help remember. And let's say maybe when he jumps to the top, maybe I want another camera angle that meets him up there. Okay. Alright, so I could go on and on and on throughout this. These are just a couple really quick examples. So let's say I want to start keying this, like maybe I've found all the camera angles I like best and I want to go ahead and set them up so that when I do a play blast, the camera will automatically cut to these scenes. I'm going to go to my establishing shot first and I'm going to press apply. And the moment I do that, the camera is going to snap to those bookmarked coordinates. I'm then going to make sure I have my camera selected and I'm going to go ahead and set a key. And then I'm going to watch my little fox, and maybe the moment I want to cut to this close-up, I'll press apply and I'll press S again. So watch him jump, maybe right about here. No, there's nothing in particular, I'm just rolling with it. Go to apply, and it looks like it automatically keyframe because I have my auto keys on, so it automatically set a key when I change the camera. Let him jump up here, and as he gets to the top, apply the last shot. So let's go ahead and press play. Now the camera will automatically cut to these different angles. Now let's say you want to animate a camera. So I'm going to turn off auto key so when I move this camera it doesn't automatically keyframe. But let's say I want a shot where maybe starting right here, so let's go ahead and set a key. The camera will follow the fox, for instance. Now this is why it's really important not to key your perspective cam, because now I can split screen, change this to my perspective cam, and I can go ahead and key this camera without having to necessarily worry about, what's going on with this view, because every time I change this view and I move my timeline, it snaps back to the last key. So a couple things I could do. I could manually have this camera selected and kind of move it with the rotation tools to follow the fox. I could also use a point and aim camera. I'm going to go ahead and add this to my bookmarks. A point and aim camera would be, ideal for this. That way I could key the aim and make sure it's following the fox the whole way down. So I'm going to go to about this point here. Looks like it's going to be about frame 274. apply this camera angle, and set a key. Press S, not auto key, just set a key. Now this is just going to, in this camera view, snap the camera because I'm on stepped keys. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my graph editor, which I have tucked away in a tab there. And I'm looking for the keys. Here they are. Maybe do some auto tangents to see how that comes out. Alright. Whoa! Alright, I'm probably experiencing a gimbal lock issue because this camera is going all over the place. So, yeah, not ideal. I'm actually going to... I could keep this camera, or I could go to a different camera. Yep, there's a gimbal lock. See that? So... Oh my gosh, that's funny. I was trying to get the rig to do a gimbal lock earlier, the Fox rig, so that I could correct a gimbal lock, and now this camera is doing it. That's hilarious. Alright, so the quick and easy way to fix a gimbal lock. So for those of you who weren't here when we talked about gimbal lock, when we have something inside of Maya, typically we have this rotation tool activated. This is the object rotation tool, and no matter how we move these different axes, the other two axes will always offset with it perfectly. But that's not an accurate representation of what's happening with the move tool. Actually, what's happening with the move tool can be seen, the rotate tool, can be seen by going into our rotation settings, double-clicking that rotation tool, and changing it from object to gimbal. So what is actually happening with the gimbal is that every one of these rotation controls is actually parented to another one in a specific order. So when I grab the, let's see, what order is this in? You can find out the order by going into the attributes and looking under the transform node. Looks like it's set to XYZ, which confusingly enough is backwards in Maya. It's actually ZYX, which means that the X is parented to the Y axis and the Y axis is parented to the Z axis. So if I were to grab the X axis, which is this one here at the very bottom, notice that the other two don't move at all with it, and that's because nothing is parented to the X axis. Whereas if I grab the Z axis, both the other axes will move along with it because both of them are parented to Z. And then if I grab Y, the Z axis won't move because that's at the top of the food chain, and the X axis will move with the Y axis because it's parented. I know that's extremely convoluted, but it's the best that I can, it's the best visual I can give you right now. So there's a couple of ways to fix this. One of the quickest ways is to go into the graph editor and try applying something called the Euler Filter. Looks like it's spelled Euler Filter, Euler Filter. And sometimes that will be enough to fix what's going on. Let's see. Oh, that did a pretty good job. Let's look through, at least from this angle, it looks like it did a pretty good job. Let's go ahead and, look through the camera's point of view. Yeah, I mean, it needs to be dipped down a little bit more, but that's pretty decent. So the Euler Filter is going to take the gimbal into account and play with the channels to try to untangle it. Best practice is to figure out what rotations you're going to need in advance and preset the rotation order so that whatever channels you're most likely to rotate will be the channels that are least likely to lock into a gimbal. But we can talk about that. We talked about that in class. We can talk about it again another day. Let's try not to get too far off from the camera. So yeah, you can actually go in and animate the camera if you want. Preferably with this kind of assignment, you're going to want to try to do everything with one camera. That way when you play blast, you don't have to go in and edit. But that is an option. You can have multiple cameras if you prefer, and then kind of cobble your play blasts together using Premiere Pro or some other nonlinear editing software. It's entirely up to you. But this is just a way to help you figure out how to key your camera, how to bookmark your camera, and how to get ready for the play blast. Alright? Hope that helped.